candidate for the Ward 1 position, and this is Dan Davis. So please give Dan a round of applause, and Dan, come on up.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to take this off here because this is pretty annoying. All right.
Don't let it blow away.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank everybody for coming out here tonight, and I want to thank the Merrymount Association for having all 4 of us candidates down here to have an opportunity to speak to you. It means a lot to me that you guys would come out here tonight. My name is Dan Davis. I'm 31 years old. I live at 155 Babcock Street down in Howes Neck. I grew up in Howes Neck. I've lived there the majority of my life. Both my parents both lived the majority of their entire lives here in Ward 1. Both my grandparents, both set of my grandparents, both lived their whole lives down here. Even my great-grandparents spent the majority of their lives down here. So being from Ward 1 isn't necessarily something where I'm just saying that I'm passionate, I really care about the people, but it's actually who I am. I have close to 100 family members who have lived or live throughout Ward 1 and call it home. Everyone in my family still refers to Quincy as their place of home. Way to go. So, I got my little sheet here in case I forgot. So, my chief concern for why I want to run is because I want to make sure that I do what's best for all of us here in Ward 1. As I mentioned, the majority of my family lives down here, and we all refer to this as home. So I feel like the city needs a councillor who's going to go out, take the best actions, and try to support what's in our best interest. One of the things that should have us greatly concerned is the chance for an overdevelopment leading throughout Quincy and throughout downtown. In an interview with the Patriot Ledger back on July 14th, Mayor Koch said that he hopes that the downtown is going to have a ripple effect throughout Quincy, and that the single-rise buildings no longer make sense. He was referring specifically to the block where Star Market is, and the block where Blockbuster Video used to be. And so it gets to a point where if you start worrying about what's happening around the city, they're going to start redeveloping the Quincy Center T Station, which then if you're expecting to have the ripple effect, it becomes to a certain point when does the sell of entire building across the street, which is single rise, no longer makes sense. When does the Coddington building across the street from Quincy High no longer make sense? When does Ginger Betty's, which is also a single-rise building, no longer make sense? And they will continue to put in multi-unit housing. Multi-unit housing is fine. It provides a service that's in order to be available, but it's not something that really adds a whole lot of tremendous value to our local neighborhoods. Because nobody wants to live next to a 8-story apartment building with a bunch of people. One of the goals I would like to do is try to keep these multifamily units out of our ward. That is not what Ward 1 is, that is not why we all live in Ward 1, and that's not part of what we love about it. I also want to make sure that we get our fair share of tax dollars. I think Councillor Forrest has done a good job of making sure that we continue to get the money back into our communities. I would like to see some additional steps get taken forward. I think we can all take a look at sidewalks or roads or parks that are in need of help, and we need someone to go up there and fight for us to make sure they take care of us. And most importantly, I want to make sure that we're not overextending ourselves on the developments that are going on around the city. The city's been largely funded off of bonds for the city's requirements for so far in the downtown projects and additional projects that are looming. The city has, since 2005, has spent over $120 million worth of city bonds to try to get the downtown area going. And a lot of the projects that are going in there, they're allowing tax cuts that are to go in for the housing that is in there and the commercial spaces down below. With these tax cuts, we are running the risk of having our taxes continue to go up, which is going to affect those of us who are on fixed incomes or going to be in fixed incomes in the next 10 years, and those of us who are lower income. So that's all I really have to say. I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me. And I want to keep this short and sweet because nobody wants to hear me ramble for 10 minutes about myself.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Let me ask you some questions.
Absolutely.
Let's first start with this. What do you do for work?
Right now I work at Quincy Mutual Insurance, which is up in Quincy Center next to the post office. I work in the subrogation department. To put it simply, what I do for work is I get bills in from other insurance companies. It's my job to find ways not to pay them, or to find things in there that I don't have to pay. So I am everything everyone hates about insurance.
Right. Can you speak to some of the priorities you might have if elected to the city council?
One of my first priorities, I want to make sure we take care of are the roads and the sidewalks. I mean, like I mentioned, there's a ton of them as you walk around the ward that you see. I mean, there's here in Merrymount, they're here in Germantown, they're here in Adams Shore, they're down in House Neck. You take a look at them, you see them, and it's been years and years of neglect. There's been a lot of focus in actually going back towards that. A lot of the parks are also in need of being fixed up, being taken care of as well. You take a look at it, I know the city had recently passed a bunch of funding in order to go and try to improve some of the parks, which I think is a great start, and I would love to see that continue to go forward. I would also like to try to limit the amount of bonds that the city is spending out. As I mentioned, I am worried about, as the baby boomer generation continues to move forward and retire, they're all going to be hitting on a fixed income. And I want to make sure that this is a place where if you've lived here your entire life, you continue to live here your entire life.
So on that point, we've heard from many people say, my rent has gone up to a level that I'm not able to afford it. My property taxes have gone up to a level where I'm not able to afford. What's your plan or thoughts on how the city could best mitigate that?
Well, one of the ways to do it is you got to make sure that you have actual businesses. So it's great that we're putting in a lot of the condos and the apartments. The problem is they go over the commercial zonings. So when you go and you get rid of the commercial zone piece of property, let's just, for example, not that this is going to happen, let's just say that Grumpy Whites, for whatever reason, decides they're going to fold up shop, go do something else. Ideally, you want to make sure that you get someone in there. You want to try to make sure that these actual businesses remain in place, because when they flip that over to an apartment or a condo, it flips over the tax rate, which is a much lower rate than what we have. We need to try to make sure that we get actual businesses that come in here and set up shop and try to do that. If there's a way in order to try to incentivize companies to either stay in Quincy or to come to Quincy, I'm in favor of it.
Dan, what's your background of community involvement here in Quincy?
I was involved in the Elks Lodge for a number of years. I've recently taken a step back since I've had the birth of my kid and got married and bought a house, which occupies a lot of your time. I joined a member of the Elks Lodge when I was 21. My grandfather was huge into the Quincy Elks and thought that that was the bee's knees and the place to go as far as an organization goes. So I was in charge of that up there. When I was up there, we went through a lot of difficult times. We ended up falling behind a few $100,000 in debt beyond what we could actually afford, and it created a lot of difficulties. But during that time, as we had just built a new building, which is what put us in this predicament, I was in charge of membership that was up there, which we led the nation in our division for the 2 years I was involved. And then I ended up being in charge of the Elks Lodge for 1 year. My big community service that I did was veteran fundraising. Through 2010 and 2012, I was able to raise about $8,000 for the Mass State Elks veteran fundraising, try to make sure we get money back to take care of the veterans that are in Quincy. We were able to raise approximately, I believe, $3,000. And as a result of this raising, as this fundraising, we ended up getting grants, which ended up using to go towards the Harvey Saltwater Fishing Club. And that's why the Quincy Elks, as you see today, for those of you who are part of it, is still one of the major sponsors because we're able to go ahead and use that.
What would you say your experience or skill set that you would point to that would make you a successful representative for all of Ward 1 on the City Council?
Well, for one thing, I'm not up here to try to, I'm not running the City Council to talk about myself. I'm not a very selfish person. Being up here and talking about exclusively myself is something outside of my comfort zone. The reason why I go and I'm running to do this to begin with is because I care about all of you. I care about my family. I have friends and family throughout the ward. And I think what's really important is that you need someone who actually is very caring and very passionate. And as I mentioned, is referral to my job. One of the things I am really good at is that I am good at negotiating and looking at things. I'm a very logical person. I don't really live out in fantasy land. If you look at it and it makes sense, you look at the nuts and bolts of it, you can go ahead and move forward with it. I mean, that's something that I'm really good at and I'm very passionate towards.
So as I said, we've had our current Ward 1 councillor for the past 8 years. How would your approach to serving as a Ward 1 councillor differ, if at all, from that of our current Ward 1 councillor?
I think Margaret LaForest's goals, or primary goals, which she had set out, was ideal. She wants to try to keep in contact. She wants to keep single families out of here. She wants to improve the parks, and she wants to take care of the seawalls. I mean, ideally, that is the same path that I would like to go. When I was here last week, listening to Councillor LaForest speak, and I thought that was right on point with everything that I'm running. I just want to keep the ship moving in the right direction. I think we all love where we live. I think we all love where we're from, and we would love to keep it the same.
So can you point to any votes or positions that she's taken that you can say, you know, if I'm a Ward 1 councillor, that's not how I would view things?
Yeah, one of the things that have recently pointed out to me was the involvement of the $80 million city bond, which was used for the garage and acquisitioning the building that is next to the floors to be used for. The big difference that you take a look at is the city spent $80 million in bonds, which I understand need to have parking downtown, needed to get rid of that building in order to have it. But I did not agree with necessarily the fact that we had to go and have an underground building, which costs taxpayers roughly about an additional $8 million. I mean, you take a look at a lot of the stuff that you read in the newspaper and a lot of the stuff that you hear about, and you see that you get the votes that get out there in city council. And you see it goes vote through unanimously. And you take a look at it, and from my perspective anyways, I look at it and I think, like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense for what's going to help out those of us who continue to move forward to try to take care of our taxes and to try to make sure that we live here.
In the Patriot Ledger, you're quoted as saying, "I'm very much against multi-unit housing." Is there anywhere in Quincy that you would be in favor of multi-unit housing? And if not for some of the new housing in Quincy Center, do you think that we would have attracted some of the new highly touted restaurants that are in that area?
So, to just correct as far as what that went, when I was speaking with the Patriot Ledger, I told him, I said I was very much against multi-unit housing that was going on in the downtown area. I don't feel like hedging all of our bets on luxury high-end apartments is what's best for the city. Nobody wants to live next to an apartment building, and it's real tough to get there. Now, as far as the restaurants that are going in there right now, there's a chance they probably would not have come in there to go and do that. Again, it gets back to the investment that the city is making as far as going forward towards the bonds, selling off the city-owned property to these property development companies who are then building the high-end luxury apartments.
One question that has come up and that we see here in the Merrymount neighborhood often is people who are cutting through the neighborhood on their commutes. They're coming down right here from Quincy Shore Drive, speeding through, taking it right here, back out to C Street. What are your thoughts on mitigating some of those traffic issues in the Ward 1 area?
Well, traffic's going to become a huge concern throughout the city. Unfortunately, one of the unfortunate parts is you end up having a lot of cut-throughs. The only thing you can really do to try to mitigate this is to try to get the traffic department, which has recently been installed, to come around and take a look at this. If it's a chief concern, like if everybody who lives here on this road is complaining heavily about everybody coming here, it might be worth taking a look into putting up a do not enter sign at the top of the street if that's something the neighbors are in favor of. Or if you feel like people are driving too fast, you put in a speed bump.
Last question here, Dan. We're almost up with our time here. What's your plan and what do you think the city could do better in terms of fighting against the opioid epidemic impacting our city and all of the South Shore area?
Battling the opioid epidemic it's a daunting task. The problem is that the company that produces Oxycontin, Oxycodone, fentanyl, all those opiate drugs, Purdue Pharma, they're worth approximately $13 billion. So it's going to be very tough to try to limit the availability of it throughout the ward. There isn't much you can do. Is typically you go up to a party and people will have those drugs available and people will use them, or they'll get injuries and get themselves addicted to them. Now, nobody wants to be addicted to any type of drug, and it's very tough to get off of those because they're opium-based prescriptions, which opium is illegal for its highly addictive purposes. The way that I see it is that you're not going to be able to combat stopping Purdue Pharma from putting out drugs. You're not going to combat doctors from writing up prescriptions. The only thing you can do is just try to provide the proper services to make sure that people are available. I know one of the big popular things that's been going on in Canada, which they've seen good success with, is they try to have safe zones in which people who do have these addictions are able to go in there and use them in a free environment, which will have Narcan available if in the event that they overdose. Now, the reason why they're doing this is because they want to get these individuals in there to try to get them straightened up, get them in there. You have professionals in there that can help them. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily the right step to go ahead and do, but I think it might be something that'd be worthwhile taking a look into, because I don't think any of us want to see any more friends or family or family's friends to go ahead and see them pass away. I mean, something drastic needs to happen, and I know that's not something that anybody wants to have in the neighborhood, and it would be something that would have to be looked at and addressed moving forward, but the overdoses just need to stop, and you need to do something different to change.
All right, Dan, thank you for answering all the questions, and thank you for running, and thank you for your interest in the city of Quincy. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.